to get started, I would like to do a circle if that's possible. And we're going to do it virtually. So I do have a talking piece. It's my old school bell that was given to me when I first started teaching. And no, I didn't start teaching when that bell was made. It's pretty old. So what's going to happen is, and for us to be able to do this circle, Tara is going to moderate who the talking piece is going to be passed to. So what I would like to ask is that when it comes to you, that you just introduce yourself, where you teach, what you teach, and the question is, why do you teach? So why do you teach? So I'll get Tara to start if you would, and then so I'll pass it to you, Tara. So you'll go first,
Okay.
and you'll pass it on if that's okay.
Great. And I'll pass it on based on who I see on the participant list. So because there's still some folks coming in, we now have 21, because I'm going through the list that I see alphabetically. If anyone comes in later when we get to the end of the circle, just speak up and join in. So my name's Tara Moore, and I'm the Provincial Schools Plus Coordinator at the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. And I'm a social worker, not a teacher. So I don't teach, but I really admire and respect teachers and love working in the school system. And I find that a restorative and a relational approach is really valuable to help build those relationships. So I'm going to pass on the bell to Abigail Cook.
Hi, I am going to be teaching grade 9 science this year, grade 9 healthy living, and grade 7 phys ed at Ellenvale Junior High. It is my first time teaching science and healthy living. How do I teach? I would say I teach by building relationships with the students. I think for me, anytime in an interview, relationships is probably the most important aspect of teaching for me. So start there, and then everything else will follow. Why do I teach? I teach because I love kids. I love the knowledge and the curiosity they have. And again, it's a very relationship building kind of profession. There.
Great, thank you. Andrew?
Good morning. My name's Andrew Gosney. I'm a school counselor. I've worked from primary to 12 over the years. Right now I'm in elementary. I work with a P to 2 school as my primary, or I should say primary, that's my home school. And then I'm just moving into a new to me, very small P to 6 situation. Been a teacher for about 22 years and a counselor for about 14. I got into education because I wanted to work in a career where I get to help others and make a living at it. But the helping part is good for me. So I spent a great deal of my time building relationships. I've learned over the years that fostering that sort of kind of connection really helps open a lot of doors to supporting children, encouraging them to learn as a teacher, but also as a counselor. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Anne?
Good morning, everyone. I'm a high school English teacher. I've taught extensively in junior high and high school, but for the last about 6 or 7 years now, predominantly 9 to 12 English and film and video. I basically try to teach, being an English teacher, to teach about humanity through the stories that we read and view, and connect that to what's going on in our world around us today. I've taught overseas for many years as well, so I think that tends to lend to the why I teach. I think the sharing of people's stories is really important, and I love taking that adventure with my students and going on that adventure with them. Thank you.
Thanks. Annalise?
Hi. So I am a schools plus facilitator actually in East Hants. So I, like Tara, am a social worker and not a teacher. Basically, I have a background in restorative practices before joining the school system with Community Justice Society and Mi'kmaq Family, and I love working with the restorative approach. So I was pretty excited to see this as an option here and to see how it's kind of integrated into the school system. So I really love that. And I guess restorative practices is still kind of grounding how I work with people in the school system. So, and it's been really the most important approach that I've used as a social worker since starting in this profession. And I guess has grounded my work through like social justice and relationships and helping people to achieve kind of their goals, right? As a basis of everything. So yeah, pretty excited. Thanks.
Thanks. Beth?
Hi, everybody. My name is Beth, and I am going to be teaching first grade, kind of for the first time this coming fall, so I'm pretty excited about that. I first heard about restorative approaches 7 or 8 years ago when I was teaching third grade abroad, and I went to a workshop. And ever since, I've really enjoyed and found it useful for me and my kids to take a restorative approach in the classroom. I think building relationships and having a good community is really important in the classroom. I find that I do need a refresher every couple of years or so. So I'm really glad to be here with you guys today.
Thank you. Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol Els. I teach core French at the elementary level, grades 4 and 5. How I teach is really around building community in the classroom where everybody can feel safe to take risks, because that's such an important part of learning a new language and trying it out. And why I teach is because especially with this COVID, I've realized just how much energy I get from being with kids and giving them that positive energy back. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Janet May?
Good morning. I'm Janet Johnston. I'm the head of school at Bridgeway Academy in Stellarton. Currently, I teach grade 5 through 9, but I've experienced teaching everywhere from grades 1 all the way through to grade 12. I've also taught English, social studies, math, art. How you teach. I really just believe that I've done relational and restorative
I think we lost Jenny May, but hopefully she'll be back. So we'll go to Jenny. Are folks still there? I think we're frozen.
All right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Tracy.
Okay.
I can hear
Okay,
you.
we're unfrozen. So Jenny C, can you hear us to go next?
Tara, if the one thing about circles that people know, you always have an option to pass too. So
Yes.
if you feel like you don't want to partake, you can just simply stay silent, leave the silence, and Tara will wait for a little bit, a few seconds, and if you don't respond, she'll move on, or you can come on and say I pass.
All right. Jenny has some tech issues and passes. So Lindsay?
Hi there. I'm Lindsay Ross. I am a relatively new teacher. When I think about why I'm a teacher because when I did my undergrad 6 years ago, I wasn't successful in convincing myself not to be a teacher. It's something that I thought of as a kid. I have always enjoyed school and tried to talk myself out of it for the entirety of my undergrad because there were no prospects of work in Nova Scotia at that time. And I just got my first term this year. So that's, I think it's, when I think of, why are you a teacher? You're a teacher because it's a vocation, because it's a calling, and it's what you're supposed to do.
Great, thank you. Megan?
Hi, my name is Megan Cairns. I'm a child and youth care practitioner with ABRCE. I work with school support services doing suspension prevention and support. I also do a lot of collaborative work with a youth outreach that deals with youth homelessness and sit on a number of lead tables for Homeless No More and the Preventions Task Force that's working valley-wide with collaborating partners. Most of the work that I do is based on restorative practices, so I really look forward to learning more.
Thanks, Megan. Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm an administrator in the Tri-County Regional Center. I'm a junior and senior high administrator. And I was a teacher for a couple years. How you teach, same as everyone, building relationships, getting to know the kids, and really getting to the bottom of, who they are as people and kind of working with that. And then why you teach. I kind of want to say that I didn't really have a great relationship with school when I was going through it, when I was that age, and now coming through and actually going back into the system, wanting to make it a little bit better for the kids that might not always be having a good time, and reaching them and making sure that they feel that they belong and that they're included. That's why.
Thanks. Patricia?
Hi, I am a resource and learning center teacher for down on the South Shore at Forest Heights, and I teach a lot of different skills and different classes. Why I am a teacher, during my undergrad, I taught junior sailing and loved it so much. I wanted to go on, so I became a teacher.
Thanks. Pranoti?
Hi. So this year I'm going to be teaching grade 4 in Amherst at Spring Street Academy. But over the years, I've taught several in a couple of different countries and many different grades. Why I teach? Initially, I was just taking a break from becoming a chartered accountant, and I just took a couple of years to just teach at a school for slum kids in Bangalore in India. That's where I was brought up, and I got hooked. And ever since, I gave up doing my chartered accountancy, and I've been teaching mostly because I just loved helping people reach their potential. And so hopefully that's how I teach, is keeping each of my students in mind and trying to deeply understand what their potential is and what they need from me and from our learning community to reach that potential. I really hope that I teach in a restorative manner. I try my very best. I've been lucky to be in schools that have been a part of the restorative cohort for the last 5 or 6 years. And but again, as someone else said, I feel like I need a refresher almost every year just to remind myself that this is worthwhile and this is something we need to keep. The restorative approach is something we need to keep at the forefront of our minds when we're dealing with our students. Thanks.
Thank you. Rayanne.
Hello, my name's Rayanne, and I'm a school counselor at West Kings in the Valley, the grades 9 to 12. And why I teach is because I love kids, but I also love to help them grow their skills and with themselves and with others, with relationships. And I love to build relationships with them, and yeah, that's why. Thank you.
Thanks. Sharon?
Hi, I'm Sharon Dreves, and I'm an educational assistant in the ABRCE. And what I like to do is develop a relationship with the kids that I'm working, and I concentrate more on that. And I want them to have their voice heard in their classroom and to feel that they are contributing to what is happening in the class.
Thank you. Tracey M.
Good morning. What do I teach? I'm in Port Hawkesbury, and I do some technology, film and video and communications technology. This year I will be doing Science 9, and I am also the behavior support teacher. How do I teach? My favorite way to teach is through experience. So the kids laugh when I come flying in the classroom, especially in CMT, and we talk about what happened the night before, and then we try to, in the news or world events, and we try to incorporate that into something we're building. Quite excited in Science 9 to try to teach about the 3D map of the galaxy that has just come out. And why do I teach? I remember as a child watching my aunt building things to take to her grade 4 classroom and the excitement she had. And then I remember being excited to learn and then wanted to get back for that. So I've enjoyed all 25 years and it changes with every year.
Thanks. Vicky?
Hi, good morning. I am going into my 3rd year in teaching at a First Nation school called Wamacook Creek. I'm still a little bit nervous teaching, but I love teaching. I should have did this a long time instead of hitting into my years 60 plus. I ain't gonna say what age I am. But what I teach right now is guiding reading. I've always loved that. And I had my experience with guiding readings that I do have my daughter and 4 youngest grandchildren moved here from the States since July. And I think guiding readings is crucial to have the youth understand the contents of the books, what's the title, how can they put themselves in that book and use their own little experiences. And my mom used to all of us when we were younger. And she taught me as one of the best teachers, and she just made everyone blossom at home. There was 11 kids. And I'm also probably going to teach Art 10 this year, and I believe with my guided reading group, grade 3 and 4, and maybe 3 students in grade 5 that need some extra help, there's going to be art expression this year with them in the lower grades. I think they need it. Have to have visual clues, and that's a lot of theory. That's what it's going to be used a lot this year, because during that COVID-19, I feel like a lot of kids missed, how would I say it, the outcomes, the skills onset at reading and writing. and I'm going to probably review some things and then bring it back to fit their needs. It's going to be a hard year, but I think it's well worth it. And why I teach, as you can tell, I love to teach children, and I have my grandchildren here, and I've already did a whole month plan, but I know it can already change everything. And kind of the levels with each different group, because I do have a low readers from AA all the way up to D. I do have some exceptional readers, but trying to keep them, engaged is some of the hard thing, because some do have behavior problems, and I will not be having a TA this year, which is understandable. And how I teach is they're going to be creating their own little books. I'm going to have them do verbal if they can't understand comprehension. I'm going to use aspects of where they're going to talk to me back and forth to explain it, because some people have a problem with writing. Even if they can't write, they're going to have them do that, and then do online video, maybe 1-to-1. The parent can be there, but I want to hear all the children. And that's all I can think right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicki. So Tracey, I think that's everyone. I think we got around the circle.
Okay, thank you. So, what do I teach? In January 2020, it became the first time in 25 years that I no longer was teaching. I took on this role as the Restorative Approaches in Schools coordinator. And to tell you that I miss the teaching would be the greatest understatement ever. But I really enjoy what I'm doing right now. I just wish I had a little classroom that I could sneak off to every once in a while to get my fix. Why I teach? I teach to learn. I've always taught to learn. The Dalai Lama said, when we talk, we simply repeat what we already know. When we listen, we learn. So thank you for this morning, for the circle, for your contribution. Partway through it, I was kind of feeling like that, how the teacher feels on Parent-Teacher Day. When the parents that show up are the ones you're sort of like, so why are you here? Are you here so I can tell you just how great your kid is? It's nice that when I listen here, that everyone that I listen to in this circle has a lot of passion. Looks through a relational lens. So I think it's going to be an easy conversation. I'm not sure that I'm here to tell you anything that you don't already know, but I'm more in a role of a Jiminy Cricket, sort of giving you a little reminder of the things that are really important to you and how we use those within our classrooms. So thank you for that. My favorite quote in the world comes from Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." For the last 15 years, I've worked for the Department of Justice, teaching and working with the most marginalized members of our society, the 1% of the population that does 90% of the crime. In the last 2 years, I spent teaching at the Central Nova Scotia Correctional Facility, teaching NSCC courses to inmates. And it's interesting that in my 25 years of teaching, the greatest compliment I ever got was in the jail. And it was simply this. This man of about 35 years old, he looks up at me in class one day and he says, it's pretty bad that I had to come to jail to feel respected in the classroom. I paused for a second. I said, wow. I said, well, I'm sorry that that's been your experience, but I'm honored that you feel respected in this classroom. Mostly because while in the facility, inmates tend to not feel very respected anywhere. So the fact that they were able to have that feeling in the classroom meant a whole lot to me. So the relational theory. Oh, I need a volunteer. So this PowerPoint is set up. So ideally, I would like to be in a room with you folks. I feed off of room energy. Adjusting myself to this online thing has been a huge challenge, but we're getting there. Mostly, I'm trying to avoid touching my face. So I know that you can see me. I can't see any of you. So if you're touching your face, I don't know, but I'm trying to avoid touching mine. But at this point, usually I would ask for a volunteer. Because there would be some physical action that would happen within the room when I ask this question. But there's a number of reasons why I ask for a volunteer immediately, because only certain people volunteer right off the bat, as you were all well aware. And there's reasons for that, whether it's personality styles, value systems, energy, all kinds of different things, nervousness. There's reasons why people do and don't volunteer. And sometimes the ones that have that energy are the ones that are able to sort of captivate or dominate, in some instances, pardon me, our attention. And sometimes the ones that really need it don't get it, and we have to be really cognizant of that. So, why do relationships matter? Why are they important to your work? Someone want to give me a quick response to that question? Someone willing to volunteer?
You can either turn on your mic or you can put a chat in the chat. So Patricia says they build trust.
Do they ever?
It helps to develop some attachment, which also contributes to trust.
And Tracey says you learn how they learn. Anne says they build community and help develop common goals. Pranoti says helps know what others need. And Vicky says make connections to students. And Lindsay says that's how we are wired. Our brains love connections. So you got a lot of volunteers.
That's good. I'm not surprised by that, and I'm happy about that. And all that's correct. And that trust word is really important. As I just spoke about what I've done for the last little while. As most of you can imagine, the students I work with every day have trouble trusting anyone. When you get to know their stories and get to know their experiences, you tend to understand why they don't trust and why building those relationships is a big part of that. And I'll talk a bit about that as we go through. So what do you actually need to work this way? So what's it take? What do you need to be able to work in a way that you're able to establish those relationships? And lots of times we hear folks talk about the challenge of getting through the curriculum, meeting the outcomes, and it's I've got to get through this curriculum. And I always use the analogy of a train, and as the teacher, as the conductor, trying to get that train to the station by June 28th. So they're flying along on those rails, meeting those outcomes, and students are flying off the train as you get there. And you pull into the station on June 28th, and all happy, and you turn around and there's no one left on the train. Sometimes that's the challenge. So there may be other things too, and we're going to discuss that as we go through a little bit this morning as well.
Tracey, a couple folks said patience and intention.
Yeah.
And active listening skills, listening to understand, not listening to respond. And listening skills again was mentioned. And everyone around us is invested in the process.
Without question, right? We know that listening is not waiting for our turn to talk. when I do presentations at schools, a lot of times, one of the things I talk about is that investment of time in September, that investment to listen. And we're going to talk about listening a lot over the course of the morning. But if you're able to in September, spend 15 minutes listening to each one of your students, that is an investment in time that will pay huge dividends. The hours of behavioral challenges that occur throughout the year will decrease exponentially as a result of that. I've where I've worked, that's been the deal. If it's okay with you, I'm going to share a quick story. Is that okay? Do we have a thumbs up on those chats?
Yep, they're saying yes.
Perfect. So one of the last classes that I taught was in the women's unit at Burnside, and it was I was teaching a communications class from an Afrocentric perspective to African Nova Scotian inmates. So there were 5 women taking the class. And part of the communications class was that they had to do a 5-minute speech. So because they're incarcerated, I said, this is the exercise that is about, the mechanisms that involve around the speech, time, organization, those things. I said, and since I can't convince the superintendent to allow me to give you internet access, I want your speech about the thing you know best. So I want you to tell your story. So the first lady got up and she said, when I was a kid, I was a really good kid. I was good in school, and I really liked school. She said, and my dad left. And I thought if I did really good in school, my dad would come home. She said, when I became in junior high, I started to get in some trouble. And I thought, if I got in a lot of trouble, then maybe my dad would come home. She said, now I'm 30 years old, I'm in jail, and I realized my dad was a junkie. He was never coming home. And I thought, wow. So I said to her afterwards, I said, what you have to understand is there are a lot of people on this planet who invest thousands of dollars in therapy to figure out what you figured out on your own. I said, that's amazing that you had the insight to do that. And amazing that you had the courage to share that in this room. The second, as that was the first speech that was done. The second speech, the lady stood up and she said, I was 5 years old the first time my babysitter assaulted me. She said, and I had no one to tell. She said, and then over the course of my life, it happened a number more times to a point where I just decided that it was just as easy to become a prostitute as to what was happening in my life. The third speech, the lady says to me, when I was 9 years old the first time my mother injected me with heroin. I was 13 when I gave birth to a baby from one of her Johns, and they took that baby away from me. Now, you can probably see the expression on my face at this point. You can't imagine what it was like as I'm sitting there listening to these speeches unfold, the courage of these women, their stories. So when they finished, I said to them, I have a request. I said, I'll give you a week to think about it. I said, and it's totally up to you, but I would love for you guys to redo your speeches for the administration here at this facility. So a week later, they came back and they agreed to do it. So the next week, they retold their speeches to the superintendent, the captain of the unit, the ADSO, and 2 brand new correctional officers. And when we circled up after they had finished and the staff had left, what I said to them was, what you have to realize is those people will now never look at you the same way again, because now they know your story. And ultimately, when we talk about being restorative and what that means, and being relational, and what that means in a classroom, it means us being cognizant of those facts, that those things exist. While they may not be in our own reference points, they exist out there. And it can be something simple as a field trip. And we think that this field trip is a great idea. But we really have to think about all the parameters around that. We have to think about that young person who's sitting there in that classroom, and panic drives them, because the panic is that they know they have to go home and maybe ask for some money to be able to be a part of that. And knowing that their parent has gotten laid off, or the parent doesn't have the money to do that, and the anxiety that comes from them in terms of having to ask that question. So as we work restoratively and we develop these relationships, we get to know. When we listen to these kids, we get to know. This slide that's up in front of you right now, it says this decline in social factors. Yeah, and COVID has really put a slam into that. But the one thing that hasn't changed is that opportunity for that social interaction within the classroom. Sometimes that's the place, and no one in our opening circle said, I signed up for this to be like Tara's profession, to be a social worker, but we all realize that it comes with the job, and we have that onus of a responsibility. A number of you during our opening circle used the word community, and someone even actually said their classroom. I've heard teachers talk about my classroom, so I was really happy when I heard that word come out, and understanding that community and building that. So having this opportunity to start to instill those things, and to start to open up and to listen, it's a time well spent, right? It's time well spent. Increasing social connections in our lives is probably the single easiest way to enhance our well-being. Yeah, we thrive better. I do less well as someone who's been teaching for over 25 years. I do less well sitting in front of a computer screen, not being able to see the faces of the people I'm talking to, not being able to sense that energy in the room. It's a great challenge. It's during these times that we realize how important those connections are, how important it is to be in that place, to be able to get that sense of people, to be able to listen to people. I'm going to try really hard today, as much as I can, to have people involved in this dialogue, and not just have me be the talking. The slides are slides. We're all educated people. We can read through them, but being able to learn from one another is the main thing that I want to see happen. This I literally laughed out loud the first time I saw this slide. Mounting research shows that students feel connected to school, teachers, to their students, and to school itself do better academically. Really, there's my thought when I first saw that slide because I borrowed it from Richard for a different reason. And my thought was, yeah, I'm pretty sure there's not a teacher in Nova Scotia that doesn't fully comprehend that. Our kids who are engaged, I've learned over the years that we only listen to and we only learn from people we respect. And how I know that is I can give you a concrete example that will resonate with all of you. And it generally happens in a staff meeting. So in a staff meeting, when someone who you truly respect begins to talk, you listen to every single word they say. And all the nonverbals are there. The nodding, the acknowledgement, all those things. And then when someone who you really don't respect begins to speak, those same gestures are there. The head is nodding, those things, but you've not heard a single word that person said, because the moment they start speaking, you stop listening. And sometimes that happens in the classroom. And that is not okay. The students that I've worked with over the years, there are a number of them that I have great difficulty liking because they do terrible things. But if you were to survey them, they would tell you I'm their greatest fan. And they have to feel that way. If I want to be successful, if I want them to learn, they have to feel that they are truly respected. And I do respect them as a student. I may not respect the things they've done, but I've invested the time to know the stories that sometimes give the explanation for the reasons that they've done the things they've done. And while I don't want to condone that type of behavior, I can understand where it comes from. So, this restorative classroom, this relational classroom, I've decided to think outside the box, and now I'm stuck in this darn circle. Taking a restorative approach is not just about circles. And you all know that. Everyone in here has spoken that they've had some experience around working restoratively, taking restorative approaches. They've done some training. So you know that it's not just about the circle. It's about what happens in the circle. It's about that process. It's about that practice. And we're going to look at that stuff as we get through this morning. Tara, how are we for time? We have 15 minutes before break. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. This slide deck is Tara forced me to have it because she knows me, and it's the only thing that will quasi keep me on track. So think of an average day in your life. So from the time you get up until the time you go to bed, what are some of the relationships? So I'm going to get you guys to take maybe a minute and just think about all the relationships that you experience from the time you wake up in the morning until you go to bed at night. If you just take a little paper and jot it down or punch it into your phone, but I just want you to take a minute and think about all those relationships. So I'll give you 1 minute to do that. Okay, this is where I rely on you, Tara. So maybe either showing or in the chat, how many of you listed less than 5?
So one person said COVID took them from hundreds each day to 1 or 2.
Yeah. How many people?
And then someone else had 6 to 7.
6 to 7. How many had more than 15?
One was up to 20. And someone else 15 to 20. And someone makes a joke, it's easy to get that high in Cape Breton. Haha.
That's true. That's true. Even if you're transplanted to the mainland.
Another person had 12 to 15. Someone else less than 5 in person daily, sometimes none, but sometimes a lot of interactions online. In this case, way more than 5. Then another, it can vary each day as I feel any text and phone call, even an email, is part of building relationships. And someone else says that interaction with others through Cell and Facebook is millions. LOL.
Yeah. Social media wise, it's thing.
So varies each day.
It sure does. It sure does. So generally, what would happen now is I would if we had the capacity on this technology, we would break you off into pairs offline and have you answer these. But to yourself, just take a couple of seconds and think about what happens when those relationships go well, and also what happens when there is a breakdown in a relationship. So back in 1995, when I was at St. FX, Ron McKinnon, computer science professor, came in and talked to the teachers, and he said, he did this course with us, and he said at the end of it, he said, you will, when you leave here, you will know 99.5% more about computers and the internet than any teacher in the school system right now. And now 25 years later, I am not very technical savvy, IT savvy. It took Tara and I probably about a half hour just to get me on here this morning. So interesting.
But we made it just in time.
We did. So if folks can just send a quick chat into, some comments here and there, and share, and we'll get Tara to share a few of them. So what about when those relationships go well? So what happens when they go well?
Lots of chatting. I feel good. You feel great, and it influences all the other things you do that day. A feeling of abundance in my life, well-being. I feel happy and connected. There is a sense of confidence, and I can take on anything.
Great. So those students that we have in their classrooms are no different. How we're able to make them feel will dictate how their day is going to go. So what happens?
Someone else also mentioned that they want to tell others about it.
Yeah, I want to share, for sure. Yeah, and ultimately, in a circle, in a classroom, allowing someone that opportunity can make a huge difference for the day. What happens when there's a breakdown in that relationship, in a relationship?
Stress.
Yeah.
It affects everything else. The that walking on eggshells feeling, broken trust, self-doubt, anxiety.
All those things.
You don't want anything else but go home and escape. It takes it. I take it personally, and it distracts me from other things. I do not want to listen to them, and I do not want. I do not trust.
Again, our students have similar feelings. So if they're in that classroom and they're feeling that way, chances are they don't want to be in that classroom. So lots of times the behavior will dictate their ability to exit that classroom. And they know it. And ultimately for us, sometimes we're guilty of it in that we're okay with that happening. Because we know if this certain person is not in this classroom, my day's a little easier. One of the greatest challenges I've had over the years in working where I've worked, and I'm sure all of you have heard this, some of you may have even said it, but you open the paper and you see that someone has been charged with something and arrested, and it makes it back to the school the next day, and yourself or someone else invariably will say, I knew that was going to happen. I could have told you in grade 1 that that was going to happen. How many of you have ever heard that before or said that before?
Yes, many have.
So my question is this: if we know then, why are we not trying to stop it then, before that young person gets there? And lots of times we say, we try. I can only do so much. I only have them for so much time. But if we think back to what we just talked about, we think back to those relationships, it's sometimes a challenge because they're not the easiest relationships to develop. And for us, if our life is easier in that moment, when we say, okay, let's just get through this year. Let's get this through this year, and then we'll move this person on. Right? Then they're off. Then it's like, okay, so they're now they're one more year, and then they're off to junior high. And then one more year, and they're off to high school. And high school is a whole different game, right? Because in high school, it's a different story. In elementary and junior high, we tend to be able to have the belief that we just need to weather the storm, and then the person will move on. In high school, it's a different story. In high school, the storm is really short. I think it's September 29th is the end of the storm, because September 29th is the date that the numbers go in for funding. And after that, then the young person can go. They can get suspended, multiple suspensions, and the process works to the point where they don't come back. And if they do come back, we continue to carry out a process that helps to lead to a long-term or a full-year suspension. And that's what happens, and it's unfortunate. Are we able to change it earlier on? I'm a bit of an idealist, so I think that we can. I think that if we invest the time and develop those relationships, that's what has to happen. A number of years ago, or just about a number of years ago, our program was in jeopardy. So my boss had to go to a presentation to the deputy ministers. So asked if I would come along to the presentation. I said, oh, of course, you want the Mark Anthony speech. And you will provide the Brutus speech. So we went to those deputy ministers, and my boss had all the stats and all the numbers and all the spreadsheets and all that stuff. And then my job was to reach in and pull their hearts out of their chest to make them understand how important it is. Because sometimes it's not just about numbers, and it's not just about budget lines. It's about people. It's about personalizing that, taking a human-centered approach as opposed to a system-centered approach. And in government, we're working really hard to try and make those changes to go from a system-centered approach to a human-centered approach. What I said to them was, I asked, like I've asked you, and you should always ask when you want to tell someone a story, you should always ask permission, and then they will give you that permission to tell. So I asked these deputy ministers if I could tell them one, and they said yes. I said, as a boy growing up in Glace Bay, I had ample opportunity to get in trouble. And I can guarantee you it was not fear that stopped me from getting in trouble. The one thing that stopped me from getting in trouble was the thought of the look of disappointment on my mother's face coming to a police station. I said, the challenge for the kids that I work with every day is they have no one to disappoint. So if I can get to a place where I develop a relationship with them where they hesitate for a minute before doing something and say, what would Tracey think? And every penny that you put into this program is well spent. All of you talked in the circle about helping. We're business people. We're in the helping business. That's what we do as teachers. And we will never be rewarded in the way that we deserve, whether financially, accolades, whatever. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you know that you can lay your head down at the end of and in bed, and you go to bed at night, and know that you've done some amazing things. And I think, based on the people who are in this today, and many that I've encountered around this province, that's the thing. That's what we do. We do it because when we lay our heads down at night, we know we did some really good things. So we're going to take a quick break, and I will see you guys back here at 10:30. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good break. We hopefully have figured out what we need to figure out technically throughout this. So this current slide sort of brings us to that place of how we have that responsibility within our classrooms for those students, right? You know, we often take it for granted who we are, and not the influence that we have in shaping how our students feel about themselves. It's interesting. In my life, I have a contracting business on the side. I do renovations, build things, and part of that is because I like to see things done. And as educators, we joke it's sometimes we have to wait up to 20 years to see what we had built, because we're a part of that. We're definitely a part of how that growth comes and who that person is, and we have a huge influence about being able to show them the strengths that they have if we choose to do that. If we think in terms of relationships, I always always use the analogy of a balance sheet when it comes to relationships, and within the classroom, it's similar. And whether it's you're the teacher or the student, we all have assets and we all have liabilities. And in a good relationship, we focus on the assets and we accept the liabilities. And in a not great relationship, we focus on the liabilities and ignore the assets. And sometimes we fall prey to that in the classroom. Sometimes with our students. So, what are the things that are preventing us from being restorative? So I started with a couple of things that I put there, but I would like if folks could just pump into the chat really quickly, Tara, some of the things that they feel are what are preventing us from being able to be a little more restorative within our classrooms.
Tradition.
Tradition. Okay.
Focus on products instead of process. I'm the only person. I'm only one person. What can I change? Thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Time and money.
So
habit and class size.
Habit and class size. Okay. Class size. That's interesting. So as we know, as human beings, the one thing we've discovered, whether we've been around for 25 or more years for some of us, we know there's never enough time and never enough money, and there never will be. So when I talk about systems, I talk about, I'm referring there in terms of structures within, whether it start at the Department of Education with a vision, or it be through your centers of education, through your administration, within that structure, how those systems, what things may be in play that sort of, if not prevent, sort of create hurdles for us to be restorative. And sometimes within those systems, those things happen, as we all know. And then fear. So with fear has always been an acronym for me. F is that we worry about failure. We're afraid to fail. And the E, embarrassment. We're afraid to go some places in thoughts that we may be embarrassed by it. The A is anxiety. So sometimes we have some anxiety around change. And finally, R is rejection, that people won't accept what we're trying to do. And then our own behavior patterns, of course. I'm sure I can't see you on the screen, but I'm sure there will be heads nod when I say what I'm about to say. So many of us have gone and done some professional development. We've gone and done a 1 or 2, maybe even a week-long course, and it was amazing. And not only was it amazing, they actually even gave us this great binder, and possibly with a CD, or nowadays a link to a website. And it was fantastic. And we're really excited about it. And then we go back to our classroom and we put that binder up on the shelf, and we never go back to it. And we go back to doing the exact same thing we always did. And that's not a criticism. That's just an acknowledgement of the fact that we have certain behavior patterns that we follow, and we do what's comfortable, and we do what we're used to. And even to the point that there's times when we do drum up the courage to change, or we try something and it goes really well, and then we don't tend to do it again. And not because we don't want to, we forget, we just fall back into those patterns. Is that something that folks out there can resonate with?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I apologize for the way this is going, folks, but Tara is my eyes and ears to let me know how your responses are coming. So those things. One of the things it's interesting though, someone had said class size. I don't know that's a factor, and I'd be interested to have that conversation. I wish we were in a room so we could talk about that, because lots of times we end up thinking that it's about numbers. But here's what we have come to learn over time. There are certain educators where you could put 100 people in that room and there's not a problem. And others, it's about numbers. So there's a plethora of factors that contribute to that management and that being able to function in a restorative way in that classroom based on lots of factors. And if we were all in the same room right now, this would be a point where I'd call us into a circle and we would have that discussion. Unfortunately, in this venue, we're not able to do that because of technology and time. So what makes us go from those traditions, because someone said tradition, those traditional concepts of schooling, and to that different way? How do we get to that? How do we move to that? Usually it's about influence of people that we respect. For me, almost 20 years ago, I met my mentor, and at the time I had just moved from Cape Bretoner to HRM, so there were no jobs at HRCE, and I ended up hearing about a private school that was going to be opening. So I went to work doing a training session for a summer for the potential of getting a position at this school with no guarantee. Well, I ended up getting it, and the person who was the director has become probably my greatest influence in my life. And she was able to really deconstruct those traditional concepts. We were fortunate to have a school where there were no bells, there were no class changes. Students came and they were given their assignments, and then there would be meetings scheduled to meet with teachers at those times, because it happened to be an integrated arts school. So there were a number of dancers and musicians who had other classes throughout the day. So we would adjust their school schedule around those things, and it worked tremendously. And to the point that when I went to corrections, I was actually able to incorporate those sorts of things within the classroom there. And again, whether you're dealing with fine arts students or incarcerated individuals, people are people, and being able to make those changes helped a great deal. When we think about that, it's about that a philosophy, right? It's about it's about a culture that we create for ourselves. And I'm sure that many of you have heard of Ubuntu. I am who I am because of who you are. And I'll repeat the story. I'm sure most of you have possibly heard it before. But there was this educator who was visiting this village and said to students, had a basket of fruit, and said, put it at the end and said, have a race. So whoever wins the race gets the basket of fruit. So they said, ready, set, go. And all the children locked arms together and ran together and then sat and ate the fruit together. And when asked about that, sorry, it was an anthropologist that did it. The answer from the young person, the young people, was, "I am because we are." And this resonates very well with me in terms of my career and how I look about how those classrooms went. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Halifax Youth Attendance Center, but it was created in 2006 it was a recommendation from the Nunn Commission from the Tracey inquiry. And the original intent of the program was we took the 10 most high-risk young offenders in the city, the 20 most high risk, and put them in 2 classrooms of 10. So really we had people from various communities, rivaling family networks, rivaling community networks, and put these young people together who had lots of challenges in their own right, let alone the politics of the communities or the crime families that they belong to. So being able to create an environment, to create a set of community values within that classroom where we were actually able to provide an education with folks who outside of that classroom on the street would not be friends, would be almost enemies in some ways by virtue of who they were connected to. So that part was a challenge, and having to be able to create a culture similar to Ubuntu was an incredible experience. But it comes with that community values, and I'm not sure how many of you currently do that or have done it in the past, but setting up community values within the classroom at the beginning of the year and having them be able to be a part of the decision as to what it looks like, what is it so that we're all successful, what needs to happen here so that we can all be successful. And it's quite amazing the contribution that they end up putting into it. And here's the challenge. This right where we're heading now is part of the challenge of where we talk to, because when we talk about changing a culture, this is the concept where that culture changes, especially in Western society. We look at that thought of independence, just even in the language that we use when we talk about self-aware, self-reliant, self-interest. It's all about that individual part, and we've sort of created that for ourselves as opposed to that collective view. One of my personal philosophies is that the world basically is divided in two, and I believe that the world consists of 2 pronouns, and the 2 pronouns are me and we. And I think that for some people, the lens is a we lens, and for some people, the lens is a me lens. And as educators, understanding that within there is very important in understanding what drives those people in our classroom, how we're able to develop those relationships, what we're able to put forth there, how we can help somewhat the me lens sort of in some instances be able to look through a we lens, and vice versa, the we to look a little bit from a me lens, because that self-care part is important as well. I guess we can't overemphasize the importance of how we can make those students feel in there, in that classroom, how we create that sense of ownership. One of the things that was a huge challenge, and what became crystal clear when I first started with corrections was the lack of understanding by these young offenders that they had no concept of themselves being a taxpayer. They would walk, as children, they would walk past playgrounds and they knew those playgrounds were there for people, but they weren't for them. They knew there were libraries. They knew there were sports complexes. They knew all these things existed, either in proximity of where they lived or within some distance on a bus route or whatever. They would see these things, but never having the concept of understanding that they own them, that it was, as by virtue of them being a taxpayer, they actually owned those facilities, and they had just as much opportunity to access them as anyone else in the communities. But for some reason, that's so not the case. And I thought, tried to think back to my education as I was growing up, and was that taught to us? I mean, yes, we were taught civics, and I understood the levels of government and that breakdown, but did someone ever tell me that I'm a taxpayer and that I own those things? And I couldn't recall that happening. So that's one of the things that I worked with incredibly with young people is trying to really help them get a firm grasp to the fact that you have ownership in this. So because that ownership brings responsibility, and then we're able to have that discussion about the importance of those things. Because without that, if they see no ownership in it, why do they care? One of the stories I tell the most is I had a young gentleman say to me one day, he says, "You think I care if I break into your house or steal your car? Where were you guys when I was growing up and those terrible things happened? Where were you guys when I watched, terrible things happen to my mom?" He said, "I was invisible." He said, "Well, I'm not invisible now." And I said to him, you have a gift. There was literally smoke coming out of his ears, and he said, "What the F do you mean I have a gift?" I said, "Well, how long have you been in this program?" He said, "I don't know, a year." I said, "Yeah, 8 months actually." I said, "And it's taken 8 months for you and I to develop enough mutual trust and respect for one another to even have this conversation." I said, "I'll tell you, right now, I wouldn't trade lives with you for $15 million. I said, "Here's the deal." I said, "If I decided to change careers tomorrow, say I decide I'm going to go to law school, all my friends, all my family, they would all say, 'That's great. How can we support you?' I said, your challenge is no one wants you to succeed. No one in your family, none of your friends want you to do well. They want you to run drugs. They want you to recruit girls for prostitution. They don't want you to do well. But guess what? You're a smart guy." I said, "I don't get to say this very often, but if you said to me, 'Tracey, I want to be an engineer,' I would say, go do it. If you said, 'Tracey, I want to be a doctor,' I would say, go do it. You're that smart." I said, "You're that intelligent." I said, "But if you choose to a path of education," I said, "and if you're strong enough," I said, "I'm not sure if you are. I don't know if you have the will to fight those influencers within your communities. But if you are that strong and you do choose education and you choose a career something like mine," I said, "you have an incredible gift. You can walk into that room, look that young person in the eye and say, 'I know exactly how you feel.' I said, if I were to look you in the eye right now and said, 'I know exactly how you feel, buddy,' you would be you lying hypocrite." I said, And I would be, because I don't have those reference points. I can't imagine what you've experienced in your life, where you go through. I said, but I do know this. I know what intelligence is. I said, and I've tested you, and you're a very bright young man. So if you choose to do that, that is a huge gift. So at the time, we were a transition program, so we were transitioning back to high school, and the high school did not want him back. So we went in there like a group of New York lawyers. There was 2 teachers, probation officer, 2 youth workers, a child psychologist, his mom. There was a whole group of us. And anyway, at the end of the day, we were quite convincing, and he was accepted back into the school. And he did really well. To the point that at the time, we used to do a luncheon every year for all our collateral contacts, because we wanted to be able to bring everyone together to show all of the hands that were helping support these young people. Because sometimes we, especially with teachers, a lot of times in your classroom, you feel, that you're bearing the load. Like, who else is helping with this kid? We know that this kid is screaming and in a lot of challenges in their life, and who's helping? And sometimes we feel like we're isolated. So we would do this luncheon so that folks could see the other contacts that were there. And that year, the principal at that school actually brought this young man as a guest to luncheon, which was amazing. And we transitioned him out. He ended up back in the school, and he was doing really well. I would check in with him every month or a couple of months, even though he wasn't in our program anymore. I'd still meet him and take him to lunch or for a bite in the evening or something, just to check in with him. And he was doing really well. And then one day I get a call from a youth probation officer, and he says, your boy's in jail. I was like, what? So anyway, I'm going to stop that part, though, because we have to get through this presentation. But if Tara, if you'll remind me a little later, I'll continue on with that story. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to jump out of that and into this one for a second. So I know that someone on Vicky, yeah, I think is Vicky that is teaching in Cape Bretoner. Is that right? Did I guess that? Did I remember that correctly?
Vicky, I think, said a First Nations
and
school, maybe an MK school.
Yeah, Wakaba or Wagmacook. I think she said. Is that correct?
Yes, Wamacook, but there's another way of pronouncing it. I'm not the speaker, but I can understand some. It's called Wamacook, the God will catch.
Yeah. Politics, yeah. We learn a great deal from the traditions that come from the Mi'kmaq community. Our circles that we use are based on that tradition. Even in the facilities, we utilize that, the importance of not just the whole premise of the circle, but the stories, the legends. I mean, that's how our young people learn. When you as educators, the times that you have your students' attention the most are generally the times that you're telling them a story. And it doesn't matter if you're teaching grade primary or teaching grade 12, or adults even.
Also, if I may speak, the circle also represents the circle of life from in the womb till as you get older and pass away. It represents seasons, how the cyclists and the cycles of youth growing up into the school system and in the family. And you look at everything, and then you have the medicine wheel, which we adapted to it. I mean, there's so much where the circle is connected, it's whole. It's rounded, it's not cut off, right? So it's, I find it, what do you call it? Like a peaceful representation. It makes me think of the sun. Anything round is whole.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and thank that. And to the point, to Vicky's point, even lots of times I've been engaged in circles where we actually, there's actually an empty seat left in there for the spirit to be able to be present in that circle as a symbol. So yeah, thank you for that, Vic. Students have an identity that's constructed by the stories they're told. They need other students to understand and come to appreciate that identity. Sharing the stories have been told have shaped who they are, shaped their identity, and their view of the world. It's an important step continuing a relational classroom. So if you think back over the course of your lives, you know, there's lots of stories that have constructed your identity, that have created who you are, and we all go back to that lots of times. You know, there's many times that even when we're hearing someone else's story, our brain sort of diverts to a story that's very similar that we experienced in our lives. Being able to have that commonality. So when that student shares something with you and you're able to offer up a similar reference point, that's where those connections come. That's those relationships. So generally, what is your story? So at this point, I would usually pass you off into partners to do this exercise, but you may want to do it with your students. So it does two incredible things. The first one is it allows people to really practice their listening skills, and it gives them an opportunity to learn some information about the person who's there. So generally, what happens is I'll split folks up into partners, and then you will structure your seats so that you're sitting directly across from one another, in a good posture with your hands on your legs, and you make a choice. So one person is the talker, one person is the listener. So the speaker will tell their story. They'll have 2 minutes to tell their story, and the listener is not allowed to record or use notes or anything. They just have to listen. And then at the end of the 2 minutes, they have to repeat back every single thing that person had told them. And then vice versa. Then whoever was the speaker will now become the listener back. So in all, it takes about 10 minutes. And these students get to learn so much, things that they never would have learned. And lots of times you can do some quiz questions with them afterwards, similar to like, how many of you knew each other really well before this thing, your partner? And some of them would have raised their hand that they've known this person, since they were little kids. And the question, did you learn something new in those 2 minutes? And invariably they would have. And then others who don't really know each other but learn some really interesting things about those people. So that's an exercise that if we were together, we'd be doing this, but it's something you might want to think about to do in your classroom in terms of building relationships. Because what does this visual represent to you? What comes to your mind when you look at this cartoon or character or whatever it's called? Terry, you can speak out the responses to me.
Boredom.
Boredom.
I'm just sitting here, not sure what to do. Nobody's connecting to me, and all I can think is just sitting here and when I can get out. They need to connect to me or something like that.
Yeah, interesting.
Someone else says, "Why am I here?"
I hope no one's saying that right now. So what if I do this? Now what do people think?
Thinking of others? Here I am. I wonder if my friends are having a good time. Lonely and missing connections, longing. I am one of many.
Very good. So if I think about things in ways like people who look like me all the time, do I learn? If I listen to, learn from only people who look like me, is there growth? If I begin to listen to and learn from people who do not look like me, have other cultures or identities, that's when those relationships can grow. I have a buddy, a good friend who messages me usually about 3 times a day, and I use him a great deal, and usually I use him in reference to listening to somebody complain about something in their life that to me doesn't seem like it's worthy of being put out there. I'm a little honest sometimes, but this young man who messages me 3 times a day, and who I haven't seen since COVID because he has spina bifida and some other issues, so I would not want to compromise him, so I haven't seen him, but it's been tough for both of us. But once things get to a place soon, I want to get to him. But historically, I would take him out, at least once a month. We'd go for something to eat or to a hockey game or something. But I always use the reference from him. I said, I have a friend who wheels into a public washroom and crawls down onto a public washroom floor to change his depend, and then pulls himself back up into a wheelchair and comes out the door with the biggest smile you've ever seen in your life. He's always happy. He probably has about 1 million things that he could be angry about or upset about. And I've never seen it once. He's always smiling. He's always happy. Does he have challenges? Oh, so many. Being an African Nova Scotian in a wheelchair with spina bifida, yeah, he has some challenges in his life. You would never know it by having the conversation. So why is this? So why is it that we do what is on this slide? Why do we respond to those things when we know what it requires to create harmony and respect and dignity and learning and all these and care, all these things that can exist in the classroom. Why is it that we spend so much time responding to the other stuff?
Carol says it seems easier to be reactive than to be proactive.
Yeah. To a point that, sorry, go ahead.
Yep, no, you go.
So to the point, exactly, we're so easily conditioned to that, Carol, right? Because we work within systems that do that exact thing.
And so she further said, being proactive requires an upfront investment of time and energy. And then Lindsay says, I'm guilty of being a fixer. You always look at the bad because something needs fixing, and I can help. Makes me feel needed and useful.
Well, I can relate to that. For many years, I thought I was a fixer. You know, I knew exactly what these offenders or inmates needed to do to change their life. I knew. But what I discovered was, if it's not their plan, it's not a plan. And we discover that, right? We think we can fix, but we can't. We can only fix as an accomplice to that young person doing the fixing, or the support, or the foundation, whatever you want to call it. That's our role. We can't fix, unfortunately, and we want to, because that's what we want. We want what's the best for this person. But unfortunately, we don't get to dictate that. This might be a good time for me to pick up on that story.
Before you do that, can I add one more question or comment?
Sure.
So Andrew says, I feel the structure of school can be seen as placing emphasis on getting through the curriculum over relationship building. Also, some are simply not comfortable using these approaches.
Yes, exactly, Andrew. And if we think back to a few slides ago, when I asked what's preventing us from being restorative, systems and fear, right? We're and those behavior patterns, right? Those things. You're exactly right. Those are the things that prevent that from happening. And what does it take? It takes from us exactly what we want to see in our students. We want to see the courage. We want to see them understand that they have these challenges, and to develop a plan to help address those challenges with us as the support. Likewise, we'd like to see that within our systems, and we're getting there. We're seeing progress. Is it where we would like it to be? I don't think so, but that doesn't mean we're not trying. There are people within the system, and Tara and I are lucky enough to experience a lot of those people on a daily basis. We're striving really hard to make those types of changes, and we're actually seeing some progress. If we think back to when Tara and I met, what was accepted and what was able to happen compared to now, there's been some significant changes. You can concur if you like, Tara.
Yes, for sure. And two more comments before you get back to your other story that you had started. Carol says, as teachers, we focus on the failures because these are the clear teaching opportunities. And Vicky says, Andrew, how true in your comment on not comfortable building relationships. Also not sure how to, or even afraid to do so.
And yet we're more than willing to invest time and money in professional development around curriculum. And it's nice to see. I was very happy to have been asked to participate in this for that exact reason, to be able to hopefully remind people of the emphasis that and the energy that needs to be put into doing this. So what can someone Tara, can you remind me where I left off in that story? Do you remember? What happened with that young guy? Oh, do you remember?
You got a call and he had been incarcerated again.
Thank you. See, that was just my test of Tara to see if she's paying attention as the moderator. Perfect. Yes, your boy's in jail was what I got told. So it just so happened that my former boss had gotten a new position and was the deputy superintendent at the Central Nova Scotia. So I call him up and I said, I want to see this guy. And he's like, what, man? He said, he's not even on your caseload anymore. What do you, I'm like, make it happen. He's like, oh, okay, all right. So I don't know how familiar with the facility or jail process people are, but as an inmate, when you're told you have a professional visit, 99 out of 100 times that means your lawyer. So they say you have a professional visit, you expect that your lawyer is there. So I go to the facility and I'm in the room, visitor room, and he comes to the door and he sees me there and he's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Oh no, that's not the question. What are you doing here?" So it turned out what happened was he and another young man, at the time in the community they lived, there was a vacant unit, and the police had set it up as a surveillance house with cameras and all the rest. And they were told to go burn it. And they were told by people who they were not able to say no to in that community. So they lit it on fire. But like I just had said, it was a police surveillance house. So they were easily caught on multiple cameras doing this. So he was charged with arson. So I immediately go to the school. I talk to the vice principal, and he talks to the teachers, and we get his work packages from the school. And the teacher at the facility administers the work package. So he completes the courses that he's been completing, and then does a couple more correspondence courses while he's incarcerated. So the day he gets released, I meet him, I take him for lunch. And at this time, he is now 19 years old. So going back to the high school is not an option. So we get him enrolled at that time, FLEC, which would be BFEC now. So we get enrolled. He needs 6 courses to graduate. So he takes 3 the first semester. Does doing well. I checking in with him once a month or whatever, and he's doing super well. Second semester, he's doing just as well, if not better, to the point that he is. I go to see him on this one day, and he tells me that he has been chosen to be the valedictorian at the graduation. And I'm ecstatically proud of him. So at this time, it was still the grade 12 English provincial exam that were being done. So he was the next day he was writing his last exam, the grade 12 provincial, and I get a call and it says, "Your boy's back in jail." So hopefully we'll have enough time at the very end of this for me to finish that story if we can get through. This next slide is the video that Tara has uploaded to the chat. If folks are able to copy that, I would love for you to watch it. It's about 17 minutes. Is that what you said, Tara? It's about 15 minutes long, somewhere in
Yes.
that. So we'd like folks to watch that. I don't know how many of you have ever seen it or heard of Simon Sinek, but when you do get to watch it, we'll think back to our opening circle in terms of what, how, and why. I asked that question. So what Tara will also do is share my contact information, my email, with folks at the end too. So if there's any questions that arise as a result of any of this, you can feel free to contact me or contact Tara, and she can reach me, either, whatever works. But if folks can take some time, hopefully not at this exact moment, but afterwards, to watch this video. So in terms of when we think about Simon Sinek, he draws this simple circle about why, how, and what. So if we think about in terms of, for us, if we think about relational theory, a restorative approach, and then restorative practices, that's the why, the how, the what. So at the core of it, we know relationships matter. How we organize relationships in school, they have that ripple effect. We all know that, you know, there's certain individuals within a school that have a reputation, and you've been in staff rooms where you hear teachers talk about this individual, and you're looking and going, who are they talking about? That is not the person I know. That is not the person. That's not how that person behaves in my room. That's because of relationships. So the restorative approach, so the relational principles for practice. So we look at how those work, and then the practices themselves, right? So we look at these circles, community building, sharing circles, learning circles. There's a great comment there called guest teachers. Richard tells this story when he was a principal. One of his teachers signed this. The challenge he was having was that whenever a substitute would come in, her class would have some challenges. She would hear back that the substitute had a pretty tough time within that class, and I'm sure many of you have heard that over the years as well. So what happened was she changed the references. So she began to say to them, "So I'm going to be away tomorrow, and while I'm away, I have a guest teacher coming in who's going to share some information with you about whatever," and just started changing the language and started talking about it from a guest teacher perspective. And lo and behold, the behavior changed as a result of that. So as those students viewed these teachers as guests coming in, because she talked about, so what's a guest mean, and had that conversation with her class. What's it mean when someone's your guest, and how do you treat a guest, and those sorts of things. And lo and behold, that behavior changed as a result. So this restorative approach that we're talking about, it's not designed for when things go wrong. It's more about making sure things are going right. And it's not designed for some people. It's designed for everyone. And it's more so important in the hard cases. But here's what I've come to understand over time is that if we do the practice, so if those students become familiar with those circles, so if those circles happen on a regular basis, they become comfortable with the format. So then when there is an incident or something, a serious situation, when it comes time to address that in the circle format, those people are already comfortable with that process. They're already comfortable with how that this format of the circle, how the circle works. So it becomes less a challenge addressing the issue or the incident, as opposed to adding, the foreignness of that circle process that these young people would have to go through on top of having to deal with the situation or the incident that they're involved in. This is the crux of we guide from. So there's a number of organizations and entities that put forth restorative practices, restorative approach, all those things. For us, it's here in Nova Scotia and lots of other places that are following similar. We go from these. We look at these restorative principles. So number one, no surprise to any of you, relationally focused, understanding and seeking structure, support, just relationships. So having those just relationships within there, we know that's how we work. If you want to make it through your day, having those relationships are important. It's comprehensive, holistic, and integrative. So being able to connect the dots, those circumstances, incidents don't happen out of isolation, right? Incidents, we tend to find out through the process of a story that there was other factors that contributed to what happened in that instance. Inclusiveness. So when we're within that, having empowering that first voice, allowing people to have their say in there. Always for my job, it was when you're teaching at a jail or a facility, you automatically assume that every single individual in there has experienced some significant trauma in their life, hence them becoming incarcerated. The whole concept of cultural awareness and it being needs-based needs to be responsive, right? Textual, flexible practices, but also having that data. We talk about best practices, but we also know that this is our community. This is our community within this classroom has its own unique factors and unique situations that lend to that may not fit some cookie cutter structure. We have to be able to do that. So folks focused on individual and collective responsibility. For those of you who talked about you create those community values within your classroom, that they're able to go back to that as a focus in terms of dealing with this is what we decided as a group. This is not a personal attack on you. This is just us looking at what we all decided was going to be collectively what we're going forth with. Collaboration and non-adversarial. It's tough because the systems that we talk about are based on adversarial approaches. Whether we look at departments within government, the things we end up silo. Even that silo between sometimes the administration and the staff. Sometimes it's fragmented and being able to look at that, and then always forward focus. Right? We fail forward. So following through those principles, we could go through this, but I know we're running out of time, so they're there for you to go through when we get through there. Yeah, I apologize because I'm just trying to be cognizant of our time. I think we have about 2 minutes. So if folks read through there and there's anything within these that have to think, because I really want to finish up by being able to tell you folks the last part of the story. Is that fair? Getting a yes?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So what's happened to this young man? Am I able to come on and see here, Tara? Is that possible? I come on here? Oh, I can somewhat see some folks. There's some pictures of folks anyway. Makes me feel a little better. So to finish the story, where did I leave off? Tara?
Oh man. Where did you leave off? Okay. Help me, folks. Where did he leave off? He valedictorian, I remember.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Carol. Your boy's back in jail. Yeah.
All right.
So, when I find out that he's back in jail, and he was charged with robbing a taxi driver, and when they found him, he had drugs and a gun. And having had the previous offense, this was not looking good. In the meantime, I don't know if this was, Terry, you should plug your ears. Anyone who works for the Department of Education, please plug your ears just for this brief couple of seconds. So I go that morning to school. I pick up the provincial exam from the teacher. I drive to the jail. I sit in the room and I proxy the exam while he writes it, and bring it back to the school. So that next afternoon, he graduated in absentia. Did not get to give his valedictorian speech. Subsequently went to court and was given a 5-year sentence. And for a while, I've been telling this story a long time. For a while, that was the end of the story, and it was a sad ending. But now it's no longer a sad ending, because the individual, while he was incarcerated, got involved in a lot of things for himself, particularly in terms of music. And when he got released, he went to school. He went to NSCC for plumbing, but he also won CBC Searchlight, Star Search, or Searchlight, I think it's called. And now is doing super well. So he is an active musician here in the city. He's still doing his plumbing. And to bring this, we talked about how important circles are. So I contact him one day and say, I haven't seen you in a while. Let's go for and because one of the things that happened when he got released, he was pretty embarrassed, and he wouldn't contact me because he felt really bad. But I ended up running into Lindell Smith, and I said, Lindell, I need to tell that boy to give me a call. So he did reach out to me, and we went out for lunch. So I said, for dinner, I said, I'll come get you. I said, do you want to meet there, or do you want me to come get you? He said, oh, I would love for you to come get me. He said, because I want you to meet, I just had a daughter. I want you to meet my daughter. She had a new baby girl. So I said, of course. So he gives me the address, and you can't make this up, folks. So I go to pick him up. I pull in, and the townhouse that he's living in is the exact same townhouse I lived in 1986 when I first time I moved to Halifax. Exact same house. It was like uncanny that had happened. He continues to do really well. He's a big advocate for community and for African Nova Scotian rights, and very proud of where he's gotten to. Now that said, did he get there easily? No. And there's potentially a lot of these young men in your classroom every day, and young women. And if there's anything I can say to you is, please spend the time. As much as they make it hard for you to like them because they work hard at doing that because they don't know any better, we have to make those efforts. So thank you. I know we're a couple of minutes over time, so I appreciate you doing this. And if there's any questions, please reach out to me. I apologize. I would have loved for us to have been able to be in a room, but hopefully you were able to get some benefit out of this, and I look forward to it.